More than 60% of college seniors hold internships during their college careers, says a national survey of graduating college students in 2014. But there's a wide discrepancy in what internships offer. This summer, a federal appeals court ruled on internship guidelines. Here with a deeper look at internships today are my guests, employment law attorney Dan Eaton and James Tarbucks, Executive Director of Career Services at San Diego State University. And Dan, what are employers legally required to provide for unpaid interns?
Right, under a test that dates back to a 1947 Supreme Court decision and later adopted by the Department of Labor in a 2010 fact sheet, they have the following criteria. One is that, is this experience more like that offered in a vocational school, even though it is technically part of their operations? Does the intern benefit more than the so-called employer? Does the intern displace an actual worker? And does the employer develop any kind of immediate advantage from that? Can't do that. Is there an understanding between them that there will be no wages offered for this work? Those are the kind of criteria, and courts look at it as far as the totality of the circumstances. So not all of these have to be filled, but you certainly have to have a situation where the bottom line is that the employer cannot, the sixth criteria, which I didn't mention, is the employer cannot obtain an immediate advantage. With an underline on immediate, they can get some kind of advantage, but just not an immediate one, so that the intern will probably get in the way a little bit during this training process that is the internship.
Well, what did the most recent federal appeals court ruling say as far as the use of unpaid interns?
I said, look, let's not rely on a 1947 Supreme Court decision and the Department of Labor standards accepting it. That had to do with a railroad brakeman. What they said is, let's look at who the primary beneficiary of the internship is, and is it tied to some kind of an educational experience? That's the kind of thing that you have to look at, rather than a rigid six-part test.
Well, let me ask you this, James. Do most employers these days, do they offer internships?
Many do. At a national level, for example, the most recent survey of recruiting, university recruiting employers, about 97% said they were going to be offering them, and a majority of those were going to be offering paid internships.
That was my next question. When we're talking about paid or unpaid, so most of them are paid at this point?
Most of them are paid.
Okay, and is there like a salary range for internships?
That's a really good question. You know, things like the state law would govern the minimum wage, and some programs are set up such that the intern would get some sort of like bulk compensation at the end, like $1,500 for going through it. If it's not normally paid, some schools provide that sort of stipend for the student while they're going through.
Like an hour, but there are hourly wages, you know, some, like if you were in an engineering type of internship, right, you might get an hourly wage that looks pretty good.
And those look very good. Those typically hover between, I would say, around $20 and $27 an hour.
Yeah, so not a bad internship, as Dan's thinking right there. Now, Dan, give us an example of legitimate and then maybe an illegitimate type of internship.
Well, Peggy, in 2010, the Division of Labor Standards Enforcement, commonly called the Labor Board, issued an opinion letter on what could be a legitimate internship, and that dealt with an organization that helps for-profit employers find interns, but there was a specific educational component where these interns actually did some did some community college training, and then were sent out to high-tech employers, typically to do some sort of computer training, troubleshooting, and so forth. That's okay. Really, a key to a legitimate internship is there a clear educational component to it? And if it is, it's more likely to be found to be acceptable, even in the for-profit sector, which is what we're talking about here.
I see. Now, James, what advice do you have for students who say, all right, no, I need an internship. I need to, how do you find a good one? How do you go about getting one?
Right. Well, they may take it at university in a number of different ways. There are 45 programs on campus at San Diego State that have 4-credit internships, and we typically have about 1,800 students that complete those. They can also look on Aztec Career Connection, which is our system, and we offer just over 2,000 internships a year during the academic year, and we actually poll employers and we say, hey, did you hire our students? And we find out that just under 2,000 of them did. And those are paid internships, not offered in a class.
I see. So a student would go through their, would go to their professor or go through their program director in order to do this.
One of the criterion is there cannot be any kind of immediate expectation that a job will result from the internship. Exactly. That's one of the 6 elements.
Yes, correct. So much more to talk about this, but because I think we've all probably had an internship at one point.
Absolutely.
So Dan Eaton and James Tarbox, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Peggy.